Hi, and thanks for watching. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly how I transformed this janky plywood countertop into this live edge spalted maple slab bar top. And I'm going to explain why it took 5 years for such a simple project. This is Make or Die. Now, you got to be asking yourself, why would it take 5 years to essentially switch one board out for another board? And I'll tell you what, it's not because I was lazy. It's not because I didn't have the time. It's because I didn't have the confidence in myself. You see, I've been messing around in a shop basically since I was 5 years old. And I'm pretty skilled. I know what I'm doing. I'm familiar with power tools. I'm familiar with measuring. I get it. But I also hadn't done it essentially in 10 years. I think the last thing I built was a couple of cabinets for a buddy of mine. And that's fine because it was cheap plywood and you can always just go get more plywood. You can't do that here. You can, but it's, let's say, cost prohibitive. This giant slab of spalted maple, there is only one of them. And if I screw it up, I'm not getting another one. So, making a cut into something like that, it's a little daunting, especially when you're feeling rusty, when you've been out of the game for a while. So, once I did finally decide to get back into the game, I spent a lot of time on YouTube, refreshing my knowledge base and learning a few new skills, learning, importantly, about some new materials and tools that are out there. And this is one of those skills that I refreshed. Since my daily job isn't countertop installer, making a template was not second nature. And that's what you're seeing me do here, because measuring is for suckers. Now what you just saw me do there was make and install the template. I'm going to use the template to make all my big cuts on this so I don't, again, waste this material. So after I'd figured out where I wanted the template to sit in relation to the square edge on front, I marked it for the cut around along the back wall and also for the pole hole. And it turned out great. I cut it with a circular saw and then finished it off with a hand saw and then came back and refined the line. Belt sander, not so great. Although I stuck with it for a while. But in the end, jigsaw and a little bit of palm sanding did the trick. And let me just say, when you cut a hole with a hole saw, especially one as big as 4 inches, be careful of kickback on those. They can stick and they will throw you or break your wrist. So really take your time with those. And once I had the far end cut and the hole sawed, once I hole sawed the hole for the pole, hole sawed the hole for the pole hole, so once the end was cut and I had cut the hole saw for the pole hole, it was time to cut the rough shape in the end. I wanted something sort of natural looking. You can only go so far with straight edges, and there was going to be some more sanding. A lot more sanding. So much sanding. One of the other mitigating factors, too, in the 5-year timeline on this was we hadn't really made up our mind on what we wanted. once we had taken out this old banquette that was in there and had a new one put in, we didn't know what countertop we wanted on it. We kind of waffled back and forth until we came across this slab, and so we picked that up, and even though we had it, I knew it also needed some more time to dry. So it's a couple of years of trying to decide what to put on top of the new cabinetry, as well as a year of dry time. Now that still leaves 2 more years, and some of that was taken up with confidence and watching YouTube videos to get that back. The other factor that kept me from starting this project was tools. I didn't feel like I had the right tools for the job, but once I did, here we are, cutting a big old slab of wood. So there's a couple of knot holes and bar conclusions and whatnot in this. So I previously had gone through and cleaned all of those out with a chisel, and the Dremel actually was the most helpful tool I used for that. But once you've cleared them out, you have to come back and stabilize them, and I'm just using epoxy here. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, and I mixed in some screen printing ink to get the black color in it. Otherwise it would have been glass clear. And you just pour it in, and there's inevitably some bubbles. Fortunately, I didn't have any through holes in this, so I didn't have to tape the bottom or make a form. But there's the most satisfying part of dealing with epoxy, using fire. And then one of the final details before finishing is putting on a chamfer. If you don't know what that is, it's usually a 45-degree angle. It's a bit that you put in your router, and it runs along the edge and softens that edge. You can get roundovers, you can do chamfers, you can do a number of different profiles, but that's the one I chose for this project. And because this is a YouTube woodworking video, we are of course finishing this with Rubio Monocoat. And since this is a woodworking video in which we use Rubio Monocoat, what you're seeing here is me put on the duo coat, the second coat, the other coat, 2 coats. I put 2 coats on. But I will say it's a great product. The application is incredibly simple. You spread it around, let it sit for a minute, and then buff it off until it feels dry to the touch. And all you got to do is let it sit for a couple of days, and you're good to go. The hardest part of this whole project here, second hardest part of this whole project here is lugging it upstairs. And here is what would have been the most satisfying thunk in YouTube history when we finally set it in place. However, we've cut out the audio for that, so I'll approximate it for you. After we did the test fit, we of course had to get it ready for installation. I decided I'm going to use Z-clips for this. So I cut slots to receive the Z-clips, which are Z-shaped strips of metal with a hole on one side. The side with the hole attaches to the bottom of the countertop, and the other end slots into these biscuit slots. This is a biscuit joiner. It cuts a half a football shaped slot in the wood. Normally you would put a football shaped biscuit in there, but we're just using it to seat these Z clips to hold the top down. And honestly, the hardest part of this whole project was getting those screws to attach to the Z clips, or I guess rather attaching the Z clips to the underside of the cabinet. It's in place, it's awkward. There's a bunch of stuff sitting on those shelves because I'm too lazy to move it for some reason. And once this goes down, then the final part of the process is putting some screws in those Z-clips. And this honestly took us way too long. What you're seeing here is probably our first attempt, our first successful attempt, which I think may have taken about a half an hour. But I wiped the sweat from my brow and continued on. Now, 5 years seems like a long time to, as I said earlier, switch out one board for another board. But quite frankly, if I had rushed this, I would have probably ruined the piece. I would have gotten mad. I would have broken something. I probably would have hurt myself more. And so, honestly, if you're not ready to start a project, don't. Just wait until you do feel ready. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed anything in this video, please drop us a like, and if you want to see more projects that we do here at the Mode Theater, please consider subscribing. Until next time, make or die.